It's kind of a bit chaotic at the moment. I've got like books and DVDs and memorabilia everywhere. I'm trying to sort something out project I'm working on.
Oh, good.
But, yeah.
Well, I haven't got any more people email me or anything. There's nothing on Facebook for anybody having any problems.
Okay, well, you tell me when you're ready and you just go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay, so I think we'll make a start. So welcome everyone who's joining us for tonight's watch along of the Persuaders episode Read and Destroy. I'm delighted to have as my co-host Jaz Wiseman, who's a cult TV expert on, well, I think every series of Marriage and Rule, from the Avengers, the Saint, Persuaders, Zoo Gang. Perhaps start, Jaz. What are some of your favourite sort of cult TV series?
Well, firstly, I suppose, are they cult? Because they were very, very popular at the time. So I think that's a word that's kind of misused in a way. Yeah. By people who, Persuaders, for example, was a mainstream Friday night. Okay, that it was on Thursday night in some regions. Friday night, 7:30 sort of TV show that millions of people watched and regularly got into the top 10. I think it's been classified as cult now, but I'm not really sure I understand the meaning of the word cult, for example, because I would, it's just mainstream telly from the past that some people have chosen to remember or, well, fell in love with when they were younger or whatever. So, yeah. But yeah, obviously everyone I think who would know me knows that the Persuaders is my all-time favorite. But, I'm obviously as well known for being quite an ITC fan. So like, anything like, I particularly like the black and white era of ITC, shows like Danger Man and The Saint and Gideon's Way, like the ITC noir, as I call them. Really great, well-made shows. And I don't think people can always appreciate, or they don't get the respect that they deserve. Because a lot of the people that worked on these series came from the British film industry of the 50s and early 60s. So, and came across from Ealing. So you had some amazing directors and writers and lighting technicians and cameramen working on these series. And I always said that they were like 50-minute movies for television, and that's kind of been picked up now. I'm sure I wasn't the first to say it, but I kind of feel that's the way they are. I mean, obviously there's the 25-minute episodes of shows like Danger Man as well, and then later on things like Protectors and stuff like that. But yeah, I think they're anyway, like I say, Danger Man, Gideon's Way, all of those. I mean, I like, to be honest, I kind of quite like them all because they all have a certain sort of feel and a style. And there's lots of other sort of 60s shows that aren't made by ITC that I like. You mentioned the Avengers there. I particularly like the sort of Honor Blackman era in particular, and the black and white Diana Rigg. I'm not such a fan of the color series, although Linda Thorson had some moments, but I can't really deal with the color Avengers episodes at all, having especially produced them on DVD and then Blu-ray. I find them repetitive and formulaic and pretty dull, to be honest, and sort of color over everything else. But obviously, there's lots of other mostly ITV programs, I suppose, are the things that I particularly like. I'm not really a fan of Doctor Who, for example, or I tried Adamant Lives and kind of gave up halfway through. I didn't particularly enjoy it. So I suppose my thing is kind of ITV, and that associates from everything. There's like ATV as well, so things like Fraud Squad, Undermine. I mean, this where I am at the moment has got loads of these DVDs in this room. So yeah, there we go.
Perfect, wonderful. So what we're going to do, everybody, is we're going to watch the episode on mute. So if you have your own copy to hand, If you don't have your own copy, it's not really too much of an issue because we're just going to have sort of a general conversation, but of course referencing what we're seeing. So if everyone just wants to get their copies to hand, so I'll just give people a couple of minutes to do that. I think what we're going to do is just going to pause on the opening shot of the episode. The
sign for Allied checkpoint.
That's it, Allied checkpoint sign. Thank you, Jaz. So just want to get that to hand, and then we'll begin in a few moments' time.
Okay, so let me ask you a question while people are getting ready. Why did you start to do these things then?
Well, I think like a lot of people in lockdown, I was wondering what to do myself, because I'm a big theatre fan, so I'm always going up to London and I like travelling and stuff. So I was kind of sort of, just sort of twiddling my thumbs really at home. And a lot of other people were doing sort of similar things. The people behind the series Red Dwarf were doing quarantine, what they call quarantine commentaries every week, and I watched those religiously. So that was probably my biggest influence in terms of doing it. But I think what it was that although there was a lot of content being produced, they weren't covering things like this. So I thought, well, this might be an opportunity, because I'd done events before for friends and family, just sort of small scale things, nothing elaborate. But part of that involved interviewing people and getting comments or sort of mini magazines and things I was doing. So for some of the events, I already had a library of people to contact, which allowed me to get quite a few done. And well, I've been doing it since February, and this is my 30th event. So
well, out of lockdown, some positive things have happened. For example, like you say, you've done this. I started doing a podcast, and particularly, again, like you say, there's not much coverage on ITC shows, or there's always coverage on things like Doctor Who and all of that, but I think they're very current in a way as well. So a podcast for me was, I'm not particularly a fan of seeing myself on the screen, and let alone hearing my own voice, but so I thought that would be much better, then people wouldn't have to stare at me while I was nattering on about these shows with other people. But yeah, and of course, I did my lockdown magazine on ITC Entertains the World, that sort of sits with the podcast in a way. But yeah, so it's good to know that you found something positive to do in a strange set of circumstances.
Oh yeah, and I think even though we're sort of out of lockdown, but for the moment at least, it's not something that I want to stop doing. So, and hopefully this technology will have its place in going forward, because it's a great thing to be able to do and talk to people like yourself that I wouldn't do otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope everybody's ready to watch the episode. Before we do, I just want to talk a bit about the episode's writer, Peter Yeldham. I did talk to. I had hoped that Peter might be able to join us or have some input for this evening. And although he wasn't able to make an actual appearance, he very kindly sent me some answers, some questions that I sent him via email, and he did. I also just want to thank Peter's daughter Lynn for helping. Well, without her, he wouldn't have had the contribution. In preparation for answering my questions, Lynn did sit down with Peter, and they rewatched the episode. So in a way, he is sort of with us tonight, albeit in spirit. I'm just going to read out the answers that he gave me. And then Jaz, we'll just have a little conversation about Peter, because I know that you had some interactions with him a few years ago. So I'll just read through. So the first thing I asked Peter was how he got into television. And this was his reply. I was writing for radio in Australia and decided to move to England to try and get into writing for television. We had 2 very tough years, and then things started to happen for me. Spike Milligan introduced me to Beryl Virtue, who became my agent, and then things started to flow from there. I love writing for most mediums, TV, film, stage, or books. Not so keen on radio, though. I then asked him about how the Persuaders came into his life. And he said, my friend Terry Nation asked me to write a number of episodes, but I had several other scripts to write, so I can only manage the one. And just sort of general memories of the Persuaders. He remembers Tony Curtis and Roger Moore being very good actors, and they got on well while he was on set. He was able to watch some of the filming, but it was a very busy time for him, so he wasn't on set for much of it. The story was totally my own, and I was pretty much given free rein with regards to the script. I think the episode holds up well, and I'm glad to have been involved. And finally, I asked him what his favourite project was to work on in his career. This is a hard one to answer. There have been a couple of books I've been particularly proud of. A Bitter Harvest and The Currency Lads, been particular favourites, and a few mini-series that have been received well. But perhaps my proudest moment was receiving a Screenwriters Guild Award in 1962 for an episode of Probation Officer entitled The Gambler. Being judged by my peers would have to be the highest accolade one could hope for. I was saying to Jaz that I was hoping to get a bit more from Peter, but unfortunately, he is in his mid-90s and he does suffer from dementia, and unfortunately it has deteriorated somewhat. So unfortunately he hasn't been able to contribute more. I know he would have liked to, but he is very much with us in spirit. I will be sending this recording to his daughter Lynn, so I'm sure he will see it at some point. So just want to say thanks again to Peter for making that lovely contribution, and for obviously being essentially with us in spirit this evening, and very much a thank you to Lynn for making it all happen. So thank you very much to both of you. So Jaz, I just wanted to ask you, what were your interactions with Peter in the past?
I think I first contacted him when I was producing the Avengers DVDs, and I asked him about this sort of forerunner, in a way, a series called Police Surgeon. And of all things, he said, "Oh, I wrote 2 scripts, and they're in the Australian television archive." And I managed to get hold of the copies of the scripts, but far too late to include them on the DVD. I mean, with it being halfway around the world, and then, like all archives who say, it's open access and you can get these things, it seems to take about 6 months, because you undoubtedly email someone and they say, "Oh, we have to check the rights and X, Y, Z," and then a month later they come back and say you can have it, but it's going to take us 3 months to scan it. And then they come back and say, "Oh yeah, we scanned it, and now it's going to be like 50 quid for you to get them. And once you've paid by international bank transfer or whatever, we'll send you a PDF." So these things, it's never like you can ask someone and you get a response the next day. They take forever. So, but at least I managed to get the scripts and read them, and they were fascinating, really, because the episodes don't exist. I told a number of other people about them, including Alan Hayes, and I think he passed the word around the Avengers community that they were there. So he was helpful there. But then, I started talking to him about the Persuaders. He very kindly wrote to me as well and sent me this photograph of him at the time of him writing the Persuaders episode. So that's what Peter looked like, because often these people, they're just names on a television screen written by Peter Yeldham, or written by Philip Broadley or Terry Nation, and people never really ever see who these people were. So I always think it's nice to put a name to a face, or a face to a name, whatever. So that's what Peter looked like at the time he was writing this series, for the Persuaders. He asked me, "Could you scan that and send it back to me, and you can keep the originals?" So I did do that. Very similar to you, I had a conversation about Persuaders. He couldn't remember that much about it. He said that he was busy, so only wrote one. And there is a copy of the actual script. This one belonged to Roy Ward Baker. If you look at the top, So this is Roy Ward Baker's actual script that he used when he made this episode. Included in the episode, including in the script, is a full cast list. So I don't know if you can see that very well.
Yeah,
so that tells you all the principal actors. And this will tell you everyone, including bit part people. You know, so even like the cab driver is mentioned on the second page. Sometimes these are really great because you get people listed on these who appear on screen but don't have any dialogue. I've got a number of these where there are 2 or 3 people extra at the bottom that you think, oh, right, okay. And it is the unit list as well, as dated 22nd of July. And that includes everyone who was like the producer, associate producer and everything. And this goes all the way through from those high up people right through to Mr. Curtis's dresser on this page. I've got, again, every script that Roy did, I've got the unit list for, and the cast list. I mean, I have all 4 scripts that Roy did for the Persuaders, and the majority of his ITC scripts actually in the archive. Roy was a really lovely man who I got to know very well and interviewed, and was very, very generous with his time. He came along to my Persuaders 30th anniversary event as well, in Page's Bar in London. He was just a really lovely old guy. But in this is a typical production script in that you see that the pages are usually white, but any amends, as in first amends, are typed on pink paper.
Yeah.
So if you're in a member of the cast, they'll give you this and say, take out page 10, for example. This is page 10, and replace it with a pink one. Now, this one I don't think has got any blue pages, but some of them have blue pages, which are second amends. So it's gone back to the script writer again, or story editor, or whatever. And then it's done. But this is what's great about Roy Ward Baker's scripts. If you can see that.
Oh, yes, yes.
So virtually on every page, there'll be notes where he's changing dialogue that he's not happy with, no matter what the series is. It can be the Baron, it can be the Saint. Lots of the Saint ones in particular that I have, he's drawn all the setups of how he's going to film certain scenes. So as well as you get the little notations that he's written in there, you also get little plans of how he's going to light it, and where the camera is moving. So I'm a big fan of scripts. I love all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's probably enough. We should probably have a look at the episode, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we will indeed. So if everyone's got their copy to hand.
Yeah, I'm just getting mine sorted. Press play.
Just do a couple of seconds just in case it's turning itself off or anything like that, since we were talking.
Yeah, mine did. So it's got to go. It's gone back to the start. It says read in the disc now. But anyway, while it's reading the disc, so Read and Destroy, I suppose a little bit of background just quickly before it starts, was filmed mid-November 1970. Very autumnal episode. I think it's one of those episodes that people maybe forget. When you talk about episodes for the Persuaders, they always seem to remember the South of France episodes, and then they remember things like Greensleeves or The Time and the Place. I suppose Greensleeves is obviously a fan favorite.
Yeah.
And The Time and the Place, I suppose, primarily because of lots of London. But Read and Destroy seems to be one of those ones that people seem to forget about. So it'd be quite nice to watch along and see what people say and comment. I'm ready.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I was just going to say, I think it was, you're right, Jazz, that it's one of those episodes that fans don't watch that much. But before preparing this event, I don't think I'd seen it in quite a few years. I never had even watched the Blu-ray version of it. And in preparation, I did, and I thought it was a fantastic episode. So I think it's one of those sort of hidden gems that people do forget about.
Yeah.
So if everybody's got their copy ready, I'll just do a countdown from 5 and we'll all press play. So we'll all pause on the Allied checkpoint opening shot. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. And certainly, Jazz, you say it was shot in November. I think you can clearly tell with the mud and the rain and.
Yeah, I was going to say, look at the mud there. This is Black Park, by the way. It's behind Pinewood Studios, and it's a regular location where lots of these series would go and film. And a very cheap assembly there of a sort of border checkpoint. Literally garden sheds that are put up. Got to laugh at that. But yeah, so. Interesting choice of actors as well in this one. So Joss Ackland obviously being the protagonist of Felix Meadows, but Nigel Green, who's very familiar to film fans of things like Ipcress File and The Wrecking Crew, which is a Matt Helm film, all of those sorts of things. You can actually see the rain on the Blu-ray, which is quite interesting because when I used to watch this on you'd watch it on DVD, you wouldn't actually see the rain coming down. So yeah,
I think on some shots it's not raining, but some it is. So that's where the Blu-ray shows a slight continuity issue. But
yeah, I don't think the continuity's that bad really. So here's his two wives, Kate O'Mara, who she'd been in virtually every ITC show. She was also going to be in Department S, but they said that she was too exotic looking apparently. Right. And his other wife is Magda Konopka, who's Hungarian, I think, and was a bit of a sort of glamour puss, back in the day. So yeah, you can see the rain there.
I think she was somebody that I again tried to locate, and certain people just seem to just drop off the grid entirely, don't they? So it's.
Yeah, I think as well for the sort of ladies or the women in these roles, a lot of them were quite young and glamorous looking, and the roles for older women, especially for women of this era, is much harder. And of course, if any of them got married or wanted to have a family, it meant they had to take time out. And of course, if they had young children, it's usually 2 or 3 years. And of course, by that time, the next young female lead has sort of stepped into your shoes. I think it's much harder for the women in the film industry, and especially of this time, to maintain their career if they did take a break. I mean, someone who was I'll come back to this. We have to talk about titles of the Persuaders. It's just the best. I mean, I know I'm obviously biased, but in terms of setting the scene and telling the story, you don't really get much better than these. Some people might say Zoo Gang is up there, and I agree it is, especially because of the theme. But the matching of the theme of music to this title sequence is spectacular, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to watch a single episode to understand their backgrounds, what kind of people they are. It's very much a shorthand for picking up the casual viewers, and of course John Barry's music as well. Yeah,
I just love the fact that it is really iconic. No matter what anyone says, I think that they probably, if we're being fair, the music is probably the best music definitely of the 70s. I think Danger Man's High Wire would push it, but the graphics and the graphics and visuals and to the music are just sensational.
I think it's a shame that so little of the music exists for the Persuaders.
Yeah. But as I was saying, one of the ladies that who I've interviewed and talked to was Juliet Harmer, and she was saying that she stopped because she wanted to have a family, and she had some children, and then she found it so hard to get back into it, she decided not to bother, and I don't blame her really. So we should probably mention Roy Ward Baker, because we've talked briefly about Peter as in scriptwriter, but obviously this is Roy, who did 4 episodes of The Persuaders, and he had a bit of a reputation, he told me, that whenever a series needed someone quickly, they would always get Roy, because they knew that he could direct. They'd give him a script and he'd read it overnight and he could be ready to direct the next day and he'd get it in the can. So he didn't particularly appreciate that, but there we go. I'm sure the fans will be able to notice this van that Felix Meadows is in. This often gets commented on, the Citroen panel van, which is a bit of a favorite, I think, as well.
Yeah,
I like, little game I have is spotting it in every episode.
It's in a few, isn't it?
Yeah, just a few. So it's been in 5 Miles to Midnight, where Joan Collins has been driving it in the south of France, and it was a unit van, so it came back to England. They bought it while it was in France, came back to England, and it's been used. And there's Queen Anne's Gate, which is obviously the home of Brett Sinclair with BS1 outside.
It's like a double going into his house.
Yeah,
there.
Definitely. At that time of night in the rain, Roger wouldn't be doing that.
I'm looking at some of the episodes and of the location work. I seem to notice that Roger Moore seems to be there a bit more than Tony Curtis is on some of the locations.
Yeah, I think that you'll find that because Roger was a partner in the company making it, he didn't mind doing a little bit of extra, even if it meant like an hour after. And Tony, because Tony is very much, I need to finish at 5 o'clock. I got a young family. He didn't get the sort of union rules in England because it's very different to working in America. So Roger didn't mind putting in an extra hour afterwards if the crew were up for it, and especially if he was directing. And they all loved Roger, the crew. You've only got to talk. When they were alive, you talk to any of the crew and they'd all say Roger was an absolute gent, a real funny person. They didn't mind doing anything for him. So I think that speaks a lot as well. I have to talk about the dressing of this set. This is, Roger's apartment was a standing set, and it's so great, this set. It really is. I mean, and just all the little touches, like when they did the set decoration, they've got this spot on, just all the little things like the cannon on the table and these little drinks cabinets and all the sort of, art and sculpture and stuff. Yeah, really well done.
And we were talking about the colour episode, the Avengers earlier, but this, I think the Persuaders is a very opulent in terms of its colour and its blue. It's very visual.
So this is Vicarage Road, where Watford play football. Watford being very, their ground being very close to Pinewood. I'm not sure what division they were in at the time, but they certainly weren't in the first division. What I like about this, though, is you obviously go and see it's on location. You look how tight the ground is to the stand, and then the stand is to the environment itself. You really get a feeling that there's a football ground in the middle of almost like a housing estate or industrial estate. I love all those little bits. I love, the Watford Observer, and that's one of Tony's great sort of jackets. He had that sort of habit of wearing his own jackets that he'd found down King's Road. I think he looked great actually in his once he got out of Lou Grade's you need to dress like this, Tony, like what he did in Overture, and he thought all these, I don't want to wear these stuffy suits, I want to be like Danny Wilder's me. So I prefer it when he's just kind of wearing these kind of things.
Yeah, so there's a certain definite shift in his costume and the styles that he has.
And his hair, he stopped dyeing his hair. If you watch the first, I don't know, let's say half a dozen, 10 episodes, he was dyeing his hair black, and then he suddenly stopped and let it grow. Which is quite fun, really.
I think it's fun until you get to the movie versions that they put out, where there's 2 episodes to go and suddenly his hair changes halfway through. Switch to another episode, but
well, they were a bit naughty doing them, really, because Roger wasn't best pleased with that. I did an interview with Roger about those in particular, and he he was saying that he felt that Lou sort of stitched them up a bit, that they were undersold, especially in Italy. And, they never saw it, Roger and Tony never saw, or Bob Baker and Johnny Goodman never saw any revenue from those movies. So, but they were sold all around the world and came out on video and then DVD. And so, but, what's been and gone has been and gone, really, with that. But I think actually they were good fun, because when you think about back to the 80s, when there weren't videos as such of the series, and those compilation videos were kind of all we had, with the odd episode here and there that had been repeated. But they were, my copy of London Conspiracy, I had about 3 copies of that, because I just wore it out, where I just watched it over and over again. So they were good to have. This is the set in Pinewood. This is the Sherlock Holmes set that was used in a Sherlock Holmes film. It's like a little back street. I love the fact he's got yellow sunglasses on and it's pitch black at night.
I love the gag of putting a newspaper under the guy's arm again.
Yeah,
probably something that probably wasn't in the script and may have been improvised.
No, it wasn't in the script. No, there's lots of visual gags as well that they do that are brilliant in this series. Really well done. I feel I'm talking too much.
No, it's absolutely perfect. I know Josh Ackland is still around, but I don't think he's in the best of health. I think he's been in the care home for the last couple of years. So
yeah, lots of these actors. It's like we spoke about before we went on air about how few people are left who either in front of or behind the camera. It's really sad. And like we said, that it's this show's now 50 years since they made this series, and lots of the people who were making it weren't particularly young at the time. They were in their 30s and 40s. So you can see why there's very few people left. Sadly, I'm just so glad that at least I managed to get a lot of people's memories down, either if just in the TMA magazine I did, or when we were doing lots of things like the audio commentaries and stuff like that. Because I think one of the things as well, in particular, about television, it's looked down upon by critics. They seem to say that cinema is this amazing art form, but television is trash. And I find that particularly unfair and unpleasant, really, because you can make brilliant television as much as you can make brilliant film. It takes a lot more work to make a 24 episodes 1 hour series than it does to make a 2 hour film. Actually, these guys were working well over a year making this series. Just so everyone knows, this is Osterley Park, on the outskirts of London, and it's a National Trust place, so you can go and visit it. And we've been there a couple of times when I used to do my Persuaders film location tours. I think I did 9 or 10 of them all around the place, but a couple of times maybe more than twice we did London, but we went to Osterley Park twice. It's a typical sort of, you can imagine Brett Sinclair turning up for the weekend, and Chivers, this guy on screen now, this character is great. He's real fun, Typical Tony now acting the clown, Yes, sorry, I was saying about how TV sort of considered second rate to cinema, and then I think there's we've talked about this on our podcast, and then it's like a Russian doll, and then ITV is considered second rate to the BBC, which I find absolutely scandalous, really, because when I look at what Lou Grade was doing with these shows, he really was making them, let's compare Dixon and Doc Green to Gideon's Way, or Doctor Who to any other ITC show, the same. The BBC productions of that era were usually made on videotape in a London studio, hardly ever went on location, and, you know, not really sold around the world with the, I mean, okay, they did turn up on, you know, like Doctor Who, okay, it turns up in, you know, Nigeria or whatever, but they weren't made with the view that these will be shown in France or Spain, Italy, Germany, Australia, Canada, America, Argentina, Mexico. Like, Luke's really was like, we're going to make these on 35mm film and we're going to sell them around the world, and everyone is going to get a bit of this in terms of, like, these are quality British series, and they are. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a rant there, aren't I?
No, I think quite a completely different philosophy to the BBC that would make stuff on videotape well into the, you know, end of the 80s, and whereas this was made to be, you know, future proof, really.
Yeah, well, look how glorious it looks. I mean, okay, we're watching it on Blu-ray, and there's a bit of grain in the film, but I mean, the film stock of that time had grain in it. If people don't understand what film stock is, and I'm sorry, it's kind of like a little bit of, like a bit of grit in it, if you know what I mean. I'm not maybe best placed to explain that at the moment, but, you know, if you look on film grain on Google, you'll see what I mean. There's a bit of grain in it, and that's great. I quite like a bit of grain, to be honest. All this digital stuff that's very smooth can be kind of too smooth. But you can see here they're out on location again. This is Black Park.
I think there are
they got lucky on this day because the sun shone, because November 97 was a bit, you know, a bit rough, I think, apparently. But you know, these are well filmed little sequences. You know, the tension's building. The light on this autumnal light, I love.
I know Tony Curtis always said that it was this. He described a series of 24 50-minute movies, and I think you very much had the point. They were made as proper films with very talented crew.
Yeah, I mean, we just missed this. I mean, talking about Tony, we just missed him do that stunt there. Well, he actually did do that, and that's come from him doing a movie called Trapeze, where he did some stunts in that as well. And, you know, in this series and lots of other films that he did, he was very keen on doing his own stunts, and I think that added a lot to the actual series, you know, because there he was. I mean, he did do that flying leap there, you saw it, and he landed on the bushes, and I'm sure there was some cardboard or whatever underneath that the stuntmen always do, but, you know, he still did it. There's none of the fake John Steeds in this, you know. Like, if you watch the Avengers, if that was Steed going to do that, immediately you could see it was a really bad stunt double, especially now with DVD and Blu-ray. So more plus points there to Tony for that.
Yeah, I think you're right with Blu-ray. That you can, some of the shows you see some of the cracks around the edges, some booms coming in and that sort of thing, particularly on the Avengers and stunt people. But I don't recall any of the magic being lost in something like the Persuaders.
No.
So there's perhaps a higher level of production again.
Yeah, it's often criticised. Well, not say often, it has been criticised where, you know, people say, oh, you know, that all that money, and basically Roger and Tony were getting all the money. Well, I'm sorry, but if you look at any of the sets or lots of the locations they went and filmed, you know, it's lavish. You know, the money did actually go on the screen, and of course Roger and Tony did get paid very handsomely for it. But I think that's a bit of an unfair criticism, to be honest. So that was Whitehall in London where they were there. Sorry, should have said that. This is just a standard, standard set. They're never just standard on the Persuaders, but this is a set at Pinewood. I think it's on the M stage. The L stage was mainly where Roger's apartment standing set was, but I mean, there were big set spaces, so there would be more than one set per studio floor, and usually one would be in preparation working for the other while the other one was being set up, if you know what I mean. But again, dressed really well. Look, Drury Lane Theatre and Shaftesbury Avenue stuff, you can tell this is in the West End. Supposed to be in the West End, I should say. Magda Konopka's definitely dubbed in this as well, by the way.
I was going to say, I think it's Nikki Vandersill who would have dubbed her. She did Ursula Andress and most of the actresses in the first 5 or 6. I think the first 5 Bond films. And she did work on the Persuaders, but when I met her a few years ago, she couldn't identify which episode just because of the amount of time that's elapsed. But watching them, you can hear her distinct tone. So I would bet very strongly that it's her doing the voice.
Yeah, a number of the female actresses were dubbed. That's Pinewood, by the way. So we've jumped from an establishing shot of Osterley Park to now Pinewood. A bit of artistic license there, but yeah, going back to the ladies being dubbed. And this is the interior of Pinewood. If you've ever been to Pinewood Studios, you can go upstairs. There's a gallery up. If you keep walking the way this man's walking up here, there's a gallery, and it's got like a lot of prints on it of showing stills from famous films and TV series that have been made there, and including one. There is one from the Persuaders. So Pinewood are quite proud that they made this series, and rightly so. But yeah, they're quite going back to the ladies being dubbed. There's quite a few that were dubbed throughout the series for various reasons, I suppose. Another one of Tony's, like, I'm just having a shower gags, but this time it's not Mr. Schwartz. If you watch the old New and the Deadly, you'll see there's an in joke there with that.
Yeah, well, just gone up the stairs past the ladies' toilets, if I remember correctly, in Pinewood. Because they do various film conventions, particularly Bond in Pinewood, and of course you recognise the locations from the Carry On films. So, as soon as you walk in the door. So it's
I mean, I've been lucky. I've been there obviously a lot and worked there on occasion. But we did get very lucky once when I did a TMA location day, and Malcolm Christopher, who was the locations manager on this series, lived opposite. And I knew Malcolm quite well, and we got, I did an interview with him for the magazine, and we got on really well. And I think I just mentioned to him, I'll be up your way soon doing this. And he said, that's all right. Let's go over the studio, and I'll show them all around. And he was brilliant. We went all around the studios. We went on sets, L&M, and he showed us like where Roger's standing set was for his apartment. And we went, and this is the bit used in this one, and so it was really great. We got very lucky there, and I couldn't thank him enough at the time, because for lots of people who came on that, I kept it a secret. I mean, I knew, because obviously I'd been talking to Malcolm and we'd set it up, but no one who was coming along on that day had an idea what we were going to do. And we'd been to see Heatherden Hall Gates. And I said, let's just drive up to the entrance, see if we can get in. And they were all like, haha, you'll never get in, Jazz. And then, of course, the security guard let me in because he knew I was coming. And then we went and parked. And then we were met by Malcolm. And Gareth Owen was there as well, who's Roger's personal assistant. And, I'd arranged it, and it was great. And the looks on all their faces, they were like, and the jaws dropped, and we had a whale of a time for a couple of hours around there. And on that same tour, we actually went to the Greensleeves house, Schopenhauer's Manor, which is now sadly no longer with us. They were great days to do that, and like people were alive. I can see some comments coming up. So someone says costume sets, supporting performers, locations and cars, all top notch to contribute to perception of lifestyle they're portraying. Stephen Marshall said that. I'd 100% agree with you, Stephen. Yeah, you know, the detail is brilliant in this.
Yeah. You say it's all little things, nothing's been overlooked at all, and it's all.
No, Harry Potter designed the sets. It was designing the sets after the first 6. So Charlie Bishop did the first 6, and he designs Brett's apartment. But Harry Potter did these sets, and they're absolutely brilliant. You know, again, Harry's another person who turns out he lived 10 miles down the road from me. He'd retired to Dorset, and I just got chatting with Johnny Goodman one day. And he said, "Oh, Harry Potter lives down your way somewhere," and he gave me his phone number, and I said, "Well, that's my area code." And he said, "Oh, right, okay," and looked at the address, and it literally was 10 miles down the road. So, yeah, I went and visited him a few times. He was very, very lovely and very kind. He gave me the script that Roger Moore had used himself in the Chain of Events episode that Roger had signed for him and given to Harry as a present. And one day Harry just said to me, "I think this is more use to you than anyone else," and just gave it, and then told me the story. I was just like flabbergasted. So generous, so generous, and generous with his time as well. He did a great interview with. I was lucky to get a great interview with him. But yeah, so yeah, this. I love the fact that the gap on the door must be this big that he's looking at. If there must have been a terrible draft.
Yeah, I noticed that yesterday when I was watching it.
Yeah, like almost half his face is under the door. But that's artistic license, you know, and it doesn't spoil the magic of the series, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. I mean, even though Lou Grade and people like himself had a perception that these series would have a life beyond their original transmission, I doubt they would have thought that 50 years later we'd be watching it in high definition and dissecting various bits. So you know, and that kind of scrutiny, it still holds up very well.
Yeah, and I think obviously, you know, with Lou's shows, I mean, for example, a show like The Prisoner has been dissected so many times, but lots of his series haven't, you know, and we're watching this on Blu-ray, which is pretty stunning when you think about it. That it's, you know, and here is the Blu-ray. I'm sure everyone's got this, and I cannot say how brilliant it is. Bearing in mind that, you know, when we were, you know, in the sort of 80s, we were scrabbling around getting sort of 16mm prints from overseas, like Australia, that were cut, and, you know, or like Norway, or all subtitled and things like this, you know. And it's absolutely staggering, really, now to see this in HD, how much detail they did spend on it. Because if you think about it, when they were making it in 1970-71, they were making this as, you know, let's say Bob Baker and producer and Johnny Goodman and Roger and all that. You know, they'd had almost 10 years of making The Saint. They, you know, they knew that The Saint wasn't ever in effect going to be available for commercial release. That whole principle and idea had never, that hadn't even been thought of. So in effect, they're making kind of throwaway, disposable television that is going to be seen once or twice in England, maybe third repeat, shown around the world, and then probably forgotten, and they move on to the next one. Like they did, you know, they went from, say, The Saint, then to the Persuaders, and okay, not Roger, but on to the Return of the Saint kind of thing. When you think about it like that, if this was kind of throwaway television, it's quite staggering what the lengths they went to make it look great. There's a little bit of split screen that was there. I mean, you know, they like doing that on this series, obviously, because, you know, think of Overture, that very first
they are iconic,
split screen car race.
I think the split screen for this episode, I think, is the only thing that perhaps lets it down a little bit, just because of when you have split screen, the picture quality is never going to be as good as the original. But
there were a few bits of dirt in there, but I mean, end of the day, that's a tiny thing compared to what the rest of this is. I mean, I don't know what people are watching this on. I'm watching this on a huge screen in this room. I'm sure everyone else is. TVs these days are like, 400 or 500 quid for a huge, great screen. But as I was saying, going back to the thing of this is kind of considered disposable when it was made. But you look at the detail. They didn't have to dress those sets that well if they didn't want to. They could have sets could have been far more simplistic. And far less elaborate, really, but they didn't. So I mean, that's to our benefit as well now as a viewer watching this.
It's even things like the classic Doctor Who series, particularly episodes that have been lost for decades and then come back, and you watch them, and the detail in the sets and the costumes and that was even more so than this, designed to be just one and never seen again. But it didn't deter the people involved, that's for sure.
No, and I think if you're involved in something like this, you obviously want to do the best you can, because it's your job and you take pride in your job and you want to go on to the next series. And lots of these people who worked on this, with Bob Baker, Johnny Goodman, Roger, they'd all work, lots of them had worked on The Saint and stuff. So they all kind of knew each other and they all just wanted to do the best that they could, quite rightly so,
Yeah.
So that's Pinewood we're back at now. We're jumping all over the shop with this, which is quite fun because we're going from Pinewood to, there was a shot of Tony running down a bit of, Osterley Park, but like seconds before he was coming out of the Pinewood, and then he was in the set, so it's lots of crossing over. So that this is like a set. You can see that at Pinewood, and he's lost his memoirs. Oh dear! But Pinewood, he knows. Go on.
It's not that easy to get into these days. I think particularly because Disney.
No. It's like it's like Fort Knox now.
Yeah. I remember being to a couple of James Bond events that Gareth Owen was running, and they did tours of the gardens, and some fans were pointing out that they'd been there 20 years ago, and a part of the garden was discarded, the Statue of Liberty from the first Superman film. It was just the polystyrene thing, it just been discarded, and it's sitting there for anybody to take it, and then there's no fences, and it was all just a different world, really.
Yeah, well, I mentioned a film earlier that Nigel Green was in called The Wrecking Crew, which is a Matt Helm film, which I'm not sure if it's available in the UK, but anyway, I've got the American DVD set of it. And in that, there's some like giant chess pieces, and they were kicking around, and it was made at Pinewood in late 60s. And those chess pieces were kicking around Pinewood for years afterwards. They were there even well into the 80s. I don't know what happened. I did hear a rumor that there was a sort of a kind of impromptu auction at the Pinewood prop store, and lots of these things were just give us 20 quid and you can have it. But I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. That might just be hearsay.
There certainly wasn't an awareness of any value, I think, until more sort of the last 20 years or so. And I think it's, a bit grim as a result that everything seems to have a price tag, and somebody would have stolen it the moment they saw it. I think it's some of the fan world philosophy of its purity, really. I think.
Yeah, well, I think now, especially like with a big film or a television series, anything and everything they know is going to appeal to a fan market somewhere. So they, whether it be a prop or whether they can kind of just sell it or whatever. But yeah, things were different then.
Yeah.
Which shows that like GPO postal directory, S to Z, is when London had more than one. People watching that now, a younger person might think, "What is that?" It's quite funny, really.
Yeah. Because in many respects, a lot of these series are timeless, but there's the odd thing here and there that just sort of screams 60s, 70s, or whatever it might be, whether it be fashion or reference like that.
Yeah, that's a nice Ford. Yeah, I just see that a chap called Stephen Marshall has commented saying Harvey Hall of Blondville and Kate Amara both worked together with Roy Wood Baker on Hammer's The Vampire Lovers, released in 1970. And you're absolutely right there. And of course, part of Roy's job as a director would be to basically kind of cast as well. So he would have people in mind. He would read the script and think, oh, I know a girl or a chap who that would suit that part, and he would just tell the casting agent, or I'd like Kate O'Mara for this role, or I'd like, and directors always had their favorites, whether that be like, a guy who's going to play like an action part or, a leading lady. Lots of them had their favorites and who they liked on screen, that, she's always good opposite. It's one of the things talking to like writers and directors a lot. You get to know, you talk about how their inner workings and how they do things. You get to know a lot of their little sort of secrets, if you know what I mean. That's a lovely shot of the two cars together, the Ferrari and the Aston. The Ferrari took a bit of abuse. It got one of the doors got knocked off because it was left-hand drive. Johnny Goodman was telling me all about that. He said that he was offered it at the end of the series, and he said after the abuse it had from the crew, because the crew used to drive it around a lot apparently, because it didn't have a mechanic, unlike the Aston that they'd sent a mechanic to chap's name's Carl Seeger to look after the car. And he did a few of the drive-bys and things like that. The Ferrari didn't. So like the crew just sort of used and abused it as and when they wanted. And Johnny was offered it at the end and said, no way.
I bet he regretted that.
I don't know. I don't think he did really. I mean, one of those things where, maybe in hindsight now, where, a car from the Persuaders might be worth, I don't know, that Aston sold for like £500,000, but back in 1970, after the abuse it had, he probably thought, no, I don't really want that. He said I had a problem with overheating a lot as well, unless it were, if it was like pulled up at a set of traffic lights, no doubt it would start overheating. So it was better if it was just running all the time, driving along country lanes and stuff, which they tended to do a lot of.
Yeah, I do remember meeting Johnny Goodman at the 40th anniversary of the Persuaders in London, and he very kindly I gave him his address, and I sent him some stuff to get signed through for the press. But I didn't think about doing events until long after he passed away, sadly. Otherwise, he would have been top of my list of people.
Yeah, he was fabulous, actually. He was a really great raconteur. Lovely guy. I love the fact that here now that Danny and Brett are like pairing off to see who can get Felix's wife to reveal the secrets. Which of course they don't do.
No. And I think it's a lovely script. There's lots of fantastic dialogue, isn't there, in this episode? Well, the whole series, but it's very well written, I would say.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I love that. Well, and of course, Tony was notorious for going off off script and just ad-libbing whatever he wanted to do. And here's that shows Roger's skill, because Roger would let him run with it, but he always knew where, like, if the scene needed to move or change, he knew he would have to deliver the line. So I mean, that's and of course the thing is, Tony, if you watch any even Tony himself would admit he never did the same thing twice. If they would do it, they act one, scene one, act one, scene one, take two. He'd never do the same thing in a take. And there is proof of that. If you watch the Afro Scoop documentary that is on the DVD and Blu-ray set, you'll see they went and visited when they're filming Man in the Middle. And there's a bit with Tony and Terry Thomas. And what Tony does is he pulls Terry Thomas out behind from the curtain, pulling him by the nose. Well, in the episode, he does it behind his ear. So he would just change everything, little things like that in each take, which if you're working opposite him and you don't know what he's going to do, is it keeps you on your toes. So it just goes to show the skill of Roger in being able to keep these things moving along.
Yeah. I think also the caliber of Tony Curtis as an actor as well, to sort of be comfortable to try new things and to keep trying to find something new from what's on the page. So the two together, of course.
I mean, if we're honest, I mean, much as I love Roger, and I obviously do and did and stuff, Tony Curtis coming to this series did send big shockwaves. I mean, he was the first real proper Hollywood star to come into a British television series. And I know that, like, Johnny and Bob used to say, wow, we've got Tony Curtis, this like, we're big league, with him. This isn't, no offense to any of the other guys that appeared in ITC shows, like, say, Richard Bradford or Stuart Damon or Steve Forrest. None of them were in the same league as Tony Curtis. No. He really was right up there. And people might say, oh yeah, but his star was on the wane and all that, when he was on the way down. But you have to look at what he did just prior to this in Boston Strangler, which he should have got an Oscar for, I believe. And that was the reason one of the reasons he said he quit doing films, that he felt that he turned in his best performance and it wasn't even kind of recognized. And of course, the actors have egos and they get bruised and by things. But I think that's to our benefit, because I don't think the Persuaders would have been the series that we all love if it had been either of the other two that were suggested in Glenn Ford or Rock Hudson. I mean, Glenn Ford was really old at this point anyway. And Rock Hudson, I just can't see it. I mean, that casting is magic. And what we watch this series for, a lot of it, is the interaction between Roger and Tony, because it is electric.
Yeah. I know they briefly considered continuing it when Roger couldn't do a second series, but I think we're all kind of glad that they didn't, because it just wouldn't have been the same. It would have been interesting, but
yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they only did 24. I mean, like, if Roger had said, again, on an interview I did with Roger, he said, if he hadn't got the part of Bond, he was sure that Lou would have persuaded him to do another series, which would have been great, obviously. Yeah. But it would only have been great if it was Roger and Tony again. Any replacement for either of them, and it's just not the Persuaders. You're thinking of Noel Harrison there, where that was muted and put in the press as well at the time, that Noel Harrison was going to be a consideration for a replacement Brett Sinclair. I just don't think it would have worked. No. I mean, Tony Curtis would have made mincemeat of him, to be honest.
Yeah. But I think Tony was, from what I read and I've heard, I think he was quite interested in doing a second series. So I think he would have got both of them back if Roger not moved on to.
Well, Tony had bought a place in London at Chester Square, and was very keen to pursue a second series. And you know, there I've got those unused storylines in my archive that were written by Tony Williamson, and they were outlined. One of them was a, if we call it series one, a series one episode that didn't get made. But the other three were for a proposed second series. Now, Roger is when I interviewed Roger about that, he said, "Oh, you know, I'm unaware of them, but I don't think Bob would have, you know, gone down that line." But when I talked to Bob about him, he said, "Oh, yeah, we were already thinking, like, after the first one had ended, we wanted to get on and do a second one." So I did get Tony Williamson, who he later did some other stuff with, including a program outline called Dexter, which was for Tony Curtis, where it was going to be Tony Curtis as a secret agent, but also like an escapologist. So, yeah, you know, that would have been quite interesting. Again, I've got that storyline and sort of script outline and stuff here for Dexter. And Bob said, yeah, that was going to be a vehicle for Tony Curtis after the Persuaders, but it never happened. So yeah, hold on. Remco, my friend Remco, has said there were going to be a maximum of 125 episodes, 120 episodes over 5 seasons. He's right. It was originally planned to run for 5 seasons. Yeah, which in some ways would have been amazing, but I don't think the Persuaders let's say if they'd have run for 5 seasons, so they'd have done 70 to 71. Probably 72 to 73. So by the time you get to 76, you know, it would have looked very, very flabby, I think, by then.
Yes, yeah. Part of the charm is a bit like, say, 40 Towers. There's only a small amount of them, which makes them special.
Quality over quantity is what I say.
Yeah.
You know, plenty of these American series go on for years and years and years, and they have, like, you know, 200 episodes of whatever. But I'm sure they're like 200 episodes, like 180 of the episodes are the same, just slightly different, you know.
Well, I think even if the quality is generally very good, there's always the odd season or the odd, you know, trend where it goes a bit down and then it hopefully goes back up towards the end.
Well, I would say that's a classic case, really, in British TV long-running series. The Saint and the Avengers. You know, the Saint for me in black and white is fantastic. Takes a little bit of while to get into its stride, but once it's there, it's superb. And then in color, it loses a bit of that London grit and magic and noir feel. And same with the Avengers. I think the Avengers, when it went to color, just became all about the color, and very, very formulaic. But you know, I would rather have 24 classic Persuaders episodes than 120 where only a certain amount are considered to be good. I mean, the first season's always going to be good, isn't it? Better to go out on a high, I think.
Well, I think what's fascinating is that if you look at a lot of series that long running, say 6-7 years, it's usually the first season or two where they're hitting their stride, and then ways to do what a normal show would have taken 3 or 4 seasons to get that perfect is very much you know, an achievement in itself, isn't it?
Have you noticed how green the sets are? Lots of the sets seem to be quite green. I think it's because it's the color that worked very well on camera on the film stock that they were using. But yeah, this is in Pinewood. This is a set.
And I think Nigel Green passed away fairly soon after this, didn't he? I think it was 74 or something. Like that, in his late 40s. So, and unfortunately, when you do research or events like this, you sort of find a lot of people didn't, you know, didn't live as long as you know would expect them to, and it's not just the last 10 years where there's been, you know, difficulty in finding people for certain episodes like this. A lot of the cast didn't really make it out of the 70s, you know.
Well, the real sad one, of course, with the Persuaders is Basil Dearden, who was the director on a number of early episodes and who filmed a really great film with Roger prior to the Persuaders called The Man Who Haunted Himself. And part of the story of that was Roger's character was involved in a car crash on the M4. And of course, what happened when they were during the production of Persuaders is that kind of Basil Dearden had a crash on the M4 virtually in the same place and was very sadly killed, you know. But like here, so you've got that spiral staircase, and now what Roy's really great at doing here, look at the way he's framed Tony there. So he could have moved the camera around so the spiral staircase would have been out of the way, but actually he's using that to sort of frame Tony in various little sequences there. Almost giving the impression slightly of prison bars because they've broken in and they're doing something that's illegal. Very, very clever.
Yeah.
And Chivers saves the day. I love that.
He's a great character, isn't he?
He's a very, really good character. Yeah. That's George Merritt, who was a really old character actor who'd been in so much stuff. I think he couldn't have been around much longer after this.
No. I was thinking it's a great way to get rid of the memoirs, but surely Felix would have just started again and wrote them from scratch. But maybe just a short-term solution and that one.
Look at those glorious end credits. They don't make end credit caption cards like that anymore.
No.
And if they were, they'd have been squeezed down the half, and they'd have the come in next, or they'd have a news thing on there.
Yeah,
that is the beauty of watching them on DVD and Blu-ray or whatever you're watching them on tonight. You can watch them in your own time and leisure, and appreciate just how good they are.
Yeah. I think the whole point with the credits and these days people talking over them, and even credits that are supposed to be, particularly somber or react to what's happening at the end of the episode, that's completely ruined because somebody's advertising match today or whatever it is after you. So I think the quality of TV, has become a bit more almost perhaps equal to film, to movies than it. Whereas back in the 70s it was sort of it was deemed as a poor quality product, but I think nowadays it's much more revered, but at the same time it's not treated that fantastically when it comes to broadcast and with kinds of sort of next up and bits of the screen disappearing for an advert and things. So
what would be really interesting to see is what a younger audience would make of these programs, because obviously someone like me who's like mid 50s, and lots of people who I know who are into these programs are sort of similar age to me, maybe a little bit older, maybe slightly younger, but I wonder what sort of demographic of say 18 to 24-year-olds would make of this. Would they just think it's retro rubbish, or would they kind of get it? It's I think their world is so fast moving and instantaneous, and they've got everything on their phone, whether they would be able to kind of get what it was like back then. I don't know.
I think people consume things in a much different way than, say, when I was growing up or when you were growing up, Jazz. It's all it's just what something like Game of Thrones or something. The way it's edited, the way it's put together, it's very fast. It's very nothing really breathes anymore. So but I was trying to think yesterday when I was introduced to the Persuaders, and I think I must have been about 18 or so, and whenever Carlton released the original DVD sets, and they released two episodes in one day. Well, a couple of months in between, and I remember going to Blockbuster Video again. That shows how long ago it was. Buying the first volume because I saw Roger Moore on the cover, and I was a big Bond fan. Didn't really know too much of Tony Curtis's work at that stage. Loved the episodes, and it was quite nice to be able just to sort of go back to the shop and then find another volume was released, and sort of to binge it.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I was introduced to it.
Yeah. Well, I hope with things like all these streaming platforms like Netflix and BritBox and all these things that it might get a new audience. And I know that like something like Talking Pictures might show something like Gideon's Way, which is great, but these kind of shows won't live forever unless they keep attracting new audiences, because majority of people my age, we might love it and that, but we're all getting old. We need some young blood to get out there and publicize it.
Yeah.
Well, a bit like yourself, you're doing a good job. So,
well, even though I'm not that young anymore, how did you get into the Persuaders, Jazz? How did you discover it?
Well, I am the youngest of 5, and my oldest sister is 11 and a bit years older than me. So she was, she's like a child of the mid 50s, really. And when we were younger, my mum and dad had a pub. So I grew up in a pub, and part of the thing was my older sister was always kind of like in charge of us, and my mum and dad were busy running the pub. So she used to keep us quiet. She used to just put like the telly on, and all these kind of shows were on from. I don't really remember seeing them, but like she says that you and your brother and your sisters were all sat there watching them and sort of thing. And so yeah, I think I remembered the music particularly because we had the theme record. So it was obviously like popular in our house when I was little with them. So and then it had always been like in the record box, and as you get older, like sort of early teens and now, I would always play it and thought, God, I love this music, and had vague kind of memories of it. But then they showed an episode in 1982 on the Best of British season called Greensleeves, which I caught, and I thought, oh yeah, this is brilliant, and then that was it really. Once seen that, we're away we were, and before we know it, it's like sort of Persuaders. And I had a video recorder in the early 80s. We had one, and somehow I have no recollection of how I even discovered these people. I got involved with like an ITC video trading ring, and there was a guy called Dave Leggett. I probably shouldn't say his name, but he was up in Yorkshire. I'll never forget that he had all these shows on video, all from all over the world. He had the Persuaders from Australia, and they were shown, and they were like 45-minute versions, so they're quite heavily cut. But he had Danger Man, he had Gideon's Way, and he had all these shows, and you think like, where the hell did he get these shows? And they were like shows that like the names were familiar with, because I was very much into Captain Scarlet as well. Still do like Captain Scarlet, but when I was a kid, I was obsessed with it. So I suppose it goes from that. And I remember he had episodes of Captain Scarlet before ITV had repeated them, and you think like, and then of course ITV repeated them, and I ended up videoing them myself. So it was an 80s sort of rebirth, really, I suppose. And then with all these things, you look and there's nothing out there at the time. This is the days before the internet. So you'd go and try and find some information about a program you liked, and there was very, very little way of finding information out. And I've just thought, oh, well, I'll try and write something myself then. And that's how all that happened. And kind of one thing led to another. I sent a copy to ITC. They said, this is great. Come and see us. Got chatting with them, got friendly with them. They gave me loads of stuff. Well, I think they gave me a couple of addresses of people involved with it. And, one thing led to another. Meet Bob Baker, Johnny Goodman. And so, yeah, it's just a sort of snowball effect, really. But yeah, it's kind of, I just suppose it must have been there when I was growing up. And that's it. Like when I say, the telly was always on. I remember we had a telly in this room that we had in the pub, and like that was our room, and like that's where my sister managed to get us to keep quiet, I think. Poor girl.
Yeah, when I was growing up in the 90s, there was lots of repeats on Channel 4 of the Batman, and Man from U.N.C.L.E. was on BBC Two. So that's kind of where sort of the interest in the retro TV sort of started. But I think the music for those particular shows, like U.N.C.L.E., like Batman, Persuaders, is almost a hook to it, because if the music if anything isn't right in this series, whether it be music or otherwise.
Well, it's a calling card, isn't it? It's the thing that says if you think you go back, it's like where your mum might be in the kitchen making your tea or whatever, but the music's on. All right, that's to say, here we are, we're going with it. So, and then of course it's repeated every week. So it's a hugely important part of a series identity.
Let's hope we find some more of the Persuaders music. So I
know well, I've been looking a long time.
Because I think it was a network. They produced a CD with the only surviving tracks of the Persuaders on it. And that was years ago. And there was some other TV shows. And I know since that's the
but this
more music has come out from other shows that was lost, but.
That has got Persuaders music on it, because a lot of the music from Crossblock was reused in Persuaders, but wasn't credited, because that was a Tribune film that Roger did prior. Stanley Black did the music, and it's all on the music cue sheets. Before we go, I don't know if anyone wants to ask if anyone's got any questions, I'll answer them, but I don't know how many people are watching, and I don't know if anyone wants to ask a question, but if they do.
Well, one question has come in now before we just sort of wrap up Read and Destroy, but Eddie's asked, do you plan to release any of the Persuaders script books in the future?
I did do one for Greensleeves, and the trouble is with the script books, I'm not doing them to make money, but they don't particularly sell very many copies. And if you think about it, a script is a script, so it's 80 odd pages long. I've got to scan every single one of those and then clean it up, put it into a book format. I don't mind doing it, and I've quite enjoyed doing them, especially in lockdown when I had a little bit of time. Maybe it's just time with me. If I could have another 24 hours per day to do the things that I need to do in terms of I've got millions and millions of ITC projects on. I say millions. I've got a lot of ITC projects on that I'm working on. There's another podcast. There's another magazine. There is another script book coming. It's on the Champions. There's one I've scanned the one for the Baron that I'm going to do. But there are a number of other projects that I can't talk about that are going to come out next year. And there's 3 there. So there's I've got 8 projects on at the moment. And I just don't have the time. I could do another 24 hours a day to do my own thing. But yeah.
I could do the same, Jazz. I'd love to do more events than I do, but it's just balancing work and things, isn't it? I had another question from Eddie. Favorite Persuaders episode, Jazz? What's your favorite?
Well, I'd say Greensleeves for UK based ones. and then for overseas, 5 Miles to Midnight. So 5 Miles to Midnight for like the road episode sort of thing. Great cast, and yeah, UK one, Green Sleeves, I think. Very predictable, probably, but
well, good choices. Yeah, Eddie says Green Sleeves and A Death in the Family again. Another.
Yeah, well, A Death in the Family is a really strong episode, particularly because it's a sort of pastiche of Kind Hearts and Coronets, and a sort of Roger gets to play all those roles, and and Tony gets to be in drag at the end and stuff. That's typical kind of fun that they got up to. So yeah.
And I think for me, I'll probably say Angie, perhaps just because the depth to it and some great stuff in it. I mean, and how does Read and Destroy Jazz sort of fit into, the is it in your top 10, or how does it sort of stand in?
Oh, I don't know really. I mean, I don't think there's any really shockingly bad episodes. Like if we were talking about say the Baron, I could name you 3 or 4 episodes I think, I could live without them. The 2 primarily based on a boat. There's a 2-parter, for example. And other series, but Persuaders, I don't tend to think there are any that are absolute howlers. It's just, yeah. I don't watch them now as much as I used to. Obviously, when I was doing the magazine, I was kind of watching them a lot more. Yeah. Particularly if I was talking to someone about a particular episode, who, Peter Bowles, for example, when I did an interview with him, you end up watching Element of Risk 2 or 3 times. You send him a copy to watch. You might even sit down and watch a bit of it with him. So obviously, when I was doing the magazines, Morning After magazine, I was watching them a lot more. But when we've done the podcasts, we've watched all the episodes of the series that we've been watching. So it was nice to be able to sit down and watch them all again in lockdown, even though I've seen them so many times. Yeah, it's fun.
What do you think are some of the highlights for you, Jazz, from the episode? For me, the Felix character, I think, is wonderful, playing with everybody and having 3 wives and all that sort of.
Yeah, he's good, Joss Ackland, in it. I think Nigel Green's pretty good in it. Chivers is great fun. I don't think there's anyone that really lets it down. It's just, like I say, it's just one of those episodes that people don't seem to talk about and remember very well. I don't know if it's because it just sort of seems to maybe be one of those episodes that there's not a sort of like a little highlight of a scene, if you know what I mean. Lots of episodes, if you said, oh, do you remember this? So they'll say, oh yeah, like it's that one with XYZ happens.
Yes. Yeah.
But Read and Destroy, I don't think it's something that I really maybe remember all of it. I don't know. There's something on here. What's a question here? Dedicated resource to locations that you've identified from this area. Yeah, Avengerland. Yeah, I mean, like when I used to find locations, I used to just send them to Avengerland and let them put them up. And any plans for future group visitations? Not really at the moment. It's quite difficult with lockdown. What we come lockdown, COVID. Who knows? I mean, I would never say never.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine it right at the moment for the next couple of years, just because of the way we are living.
No, yeah. I mean, there's lots of bond tours and things that would, aren't, just plans gone to pot because you just can't invest in the time and the effort and to do it really. But I think they'd be very popular, if you did do them again, because. But first of all, there's a lot more new fans in the last few years. And because when was the last time you did one?
Oh, when the magazine was going. Oh, a long time ago. I think the last one we probably did was the one that we went to Pinewood, which would have been about 2004.
Yeah.
They started in 1994, and I tried to do at least one a year. So yeah, it must have been 2003, 2004. I always like to try and have someone there. When we did the very first one, Bob Baker and Johnny Goodman came along, which is great, and we all met them at the Black Horse in Fulmer, which is obviously the pub in Greensleeves. So yeah, it's difficult now. There's no one left, and kind of, although like I seem to be given this role of spokesperson for the series, I wasn't actually there. All the knowledge I've gained is from years of talking to people and stuff. But I do need to make the point that I was never there. I wasn't there when they're making these shows, so I can't really speak with huge authority as such. I often have to remind I don't have to remind myself of that, but I have to remind people when they come and ask me a lot of the time. I never want to be considered like I know best, because I don't. There are lots of people that are there that will tell you the same story but slightly differently. So I'm only relaying what I've been told by usually Bob and Johnny and people like that, because I got to know them so well. When there's Remco, when did one? We did one where Sean Connery came along in London. We did. Remco, that's right. A very special guest arranger. Yeah, we did what we did do one. And we were in London, and walking along the street with Sean Connery. And I said to them all, over there is Sean Connery. Do not, under any circumstance, go and approach him. Let me go and talk to him very briefly, and I'll explain. And to be fair, they all did. And I went over and I said, excuse me, Mr. Connery, would it be possible for someone to tell, we're out there. And he was charming and he was lovely. And he gave us like literally 2 minutes of his time, but he was fantastic. And I think everyone who was there kind of either got a picture with him or got a picture of him. And I did write about it, I think, in TMA, that he made a brief appearance. So yeah, I mean, strange little things like that always sort of happened, like little funny little coincidences like that. I mean, it's like when I did the Persuaders 30th anniversary party in Pages Bar in London. I'd been working for Carlton doing these DVDs, and it wasn't long before. But I found all those Roger and Tony promo spots of them talking to camera in different languages. And the English ones where the soundtrack has been lost. But I'll never forget finding them where, they were on this knackered reel of film. And I put it on this Moviola, which is like where you'd put the film and you'd watch it back. And this film hadn't been seen since 1971 or whenever it was. This can was like rusted together, that I had to get it out, and it was like literally falling apart. And when I put it on, I was thinking like, God, this is so fragile. We're going to have to get this transferred. But I watched it through first, and I'll never forget the thing where they're talking in German. At the end of it, Roger's, I hate the fucking Germans, and I was absolutely wetting myself, and I thought, I have to show this, because and then when we put that on, I put that on that event, and that the first time it had been seen, and people were just wetting themselves. It was so funny, and they watched them all, and it's like where Roger's doing the one in Italian, and he say "I grande Roger Moore," and he says "I piccolo Tony Curtis," and Tony Curtis doesn't really get him, but he's saying, "What do you mean, like piccolo little Tony Curtis?" So like they were sending each other up like all the time in those, which is brilliant.
Because were any of those ever used, or they just
they're on the DVD sets now and Blu-ray sets and stuff somewhere, They
weren't used at the time, sort of thing.
They were used in, well,
some of them.
I think some of them were used like to promote the series, like in Spain. There's like, I think they did Spanish, Italian, French, German. I think there's 2 versions of one of them. I can't remember which off the top of my head. But of course, they didn't use the one in Germany, but Roger says that. But I think they'd have probably been used in Spain, and especially because Persuaders was hugely popular in Spain. People think it's popular in Germany and France, which it was. but the amount of press coverage it got in Spain before it was even shown is unreal, you know. But yeah, more on that later, because I'm working on something to do with that, which hopefully next year might see the light of day.
Fantastic. Going back to Read and Destroy, you do get the sense that, because I think it was, am I right in saying it was produced sort of the latter half of the Persuaders filming schedule? And was there ever a sense that you got from any written notes or talking to people that it was kind of a little sort of cost-saving episode, sort of more sort of, you know, because it's all being Black Park, Pinewood.
Well, I can tell you exactly where it was in the run, because this script, like all the scripts, have a production number. So it tells you what number production it was. Read and Destroy, if you look on there where it says P11, that means it's the 11th episode made.
Right, yeah.
So it's the 11th episode in the production. So we're almost at halfway point. And I don't know, maybe it suffers because of that, you know, not that it's bad or anything, that it just kind of, maybe it's kind of forgotten, because, you know, if you think about it, the series starts off, they're filming in the south of France.
Yeah.
And I know they make bits and pieces of 6 or 7 episodes down there, and, you know, including like when they go off to Rome and Paris and things like that. So all of those are really sunny and people tend to remember them. Then they come back to the UK and it's like late summer, autumn. And some of the ones, you know, like we said, some of the autumn light in that was amazing, really lovely. But I think people remember things like Greensleeves more, and they remember, let's think of some of the UK ones, like I say, The Time and the Place, primarily because of all the London locations. You know, I talk to people about that, you know, and it's like the Tower of London, and then Little Essex Street, and, you know, you see the car driving around London and all of that, you know. So I think Read and Destroy probably, if it's suffering from anything, it's probably just being stuck in the kind of mid-season where, you know, people maybe kind of don't always remember it. Because, of course, when you get towards the end and you get things like Man in the Middle with people like Terry Thomas, they just remember that because of Terry Thomas, for example.
Yeah.
And there are a few episodes a bit like that, you know, where they've got guest stars that you kind of just, oh yeah, that's so and so, and that one's got that one in, and or they've got a leading lady in it, you know, where you know they remember the leading lady. I mean, I don't know how popular Read and Destroy is. I've never really done a poll of what people think are their favorites. They always seem to say the same sort of ones to me.
It's definitely just sat in the middle. I mean, it's a great episode, but just others perhaps are screaming a bit louder, and you know, perhaps like Death in the Family, that's a lot of Pinewood based, but because you have, you know, Roger playing all different characters, you know, it elevates in people's minds. So I suppose
so some are much more memorable than others. I just have to say that I'm sure they've all got it, but this wonderful book by Andrew Pixley is absolutely fabulous. And if you want to, you know, get really in depth with the Persuaders, this is the thing you should read. I mean, like, I know that you know, everyone said to me, "Oh, why don't you write a book about it?" You know, and like when the network were doing this, Andrew got in contact with me and said, "Oh, you know, we're going to do this. Can you help?" And I was like, gave him some stuff, and like, you know, gave network all my scripts to sort of, you know, reproduce and stuff. And because I thought, actually, Andrew's a much better writer than I am, and you know, he can tell the story much better than I could ever tell it. You know, I might have all the facts, but his ways of getting it down on paper is far superior to me. So I would just say to people, read Andrew's book, because there are probably a few little bits here and there that I could add in, but it covers the bases, and it, you know, it's you won't get a better book, I don't think, in terms of detail than that. You might get a more colorful one with lots of pictures and stuff in, but if you want to know lots and lots and lots about the show, read that. I mean, it's superb.
Just to finish off, Jazz, before we wrap it up, what would be your 2 or 3 favourite moments from Read and Destroy?
Those little scenes where Roger and Tony are sort of playing off each other and trying to work out if Felix's wives, Magda Canopta and Kate O'Mara, know anything, and one's going for one and one's going for the other, which is typical kind of Persuaders, where they're always trying to get the girls. I think that taxi scene's quite fun with Nigel Green and the two girls as well. I don't know. I don't think there's any real standout moments, but at the same time, there's no sort of really bad moments, So yeah. Also, Andrew Pixley states in his book that they filmed in November and came back in February for some of the scenes for Read and Destroy. Do you know which is? I imagine it's probably some of the exterior scenes. They looked like the Pinewood Gardensy kind of scenes were maybe, but I don't know offhand. It doesn't say in the script, I don't think. Let me just check. No, because usually Roy would have marked them. See what he's done there. Let me just go back over that. That's Remco. I knew Remco would catch me out. He always does. So, right. Okay. Regency decorated. See, sometimes you get that. Where Roy's put a pen right through the middle of that. And this follows on the next scene. This is one whole scene where he just put a pen through it. That usually means either he's not going to film it or it's been filmed on location already. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of swatting up on that. But no, I think it's one of those ones where, and in this case, looking at it, it looks like it's been filmed already. Okay, so that might have been done by second unit. I think it's just one of those ones where it's the middle of the run. There's nothing really stand out, but there's nothing that is flat about it, if you know what I mean. It's got some, like I said, it's got all the things like Osterley Park. It's got the cars at Osterley Park. I think Kate O'Mara and Magda Canopka convincing enough to be his wives. There's nothing really bad about it, but it hasn't got that sort of Death in the Family, Green Sleeves, 5 Miles to Midnight instant sort of bosh that you remember.
Yeah, you say it's got some great moments. It's got some very good dialogue. You invite me to see your ancestral home and all that sort of things. But it's just the fact there's probably some more well-known episodes. It's like Bond films, isn't it? Some of them are very good, but perhaps they don't have the cachet of something like Love Me or Skyfall.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Which is the best one by a mile.
or No Time to Die, depending on whether you like it or not. It's the eyes of little ones, isn't it? But
yeah.
So, well, thank you very much, Jazz, for joining us this evening and reminiscing about
no problem.
Read and Destroy. And thank you to Peter and Lynn for providing those lovely introductory comments at the beginning. So I think it's good night for me, and thanks for Jazz for joining us, and maybe we'll talk again in the future about something.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks people for listening. Hope it was all right, and that people got something out of it. So thanks for taking the time to do it, and to everyone out there, we'll chat more about ITC shows, Persuaders, etc. in the future, I hope.
Yeah, be lovely. So thanks so much, Jazz. Have a lovely evening, and I'll speak to you again.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.